Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги, добрый день
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, and good evening. I'm happy to greet you at this first conference of KICS Europe, Asia, and Pacific on Education Policy and Innovation Conference. I'm Julia Levin. I'm one of the organizers of this conference, and I'm also cooperating with countries from Central Asia, Europe, and Caucasus. Currently, we would like to introduce ourselves and our work, and we actually made a short video. Paul is going to present.
In GPE partner countries of the Europe-Asia-Pacific region, limited resources have been invested so far on mobilizing and using knowledge, data, and studies produced at the national and global level, identifying and learning from promising innovations, and sharing experiences on similar reforms in other countries. To respond to these challenges, the Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, KICS, Europe, Asia and Pacific Hub connects knowledge by mobilizing global and national expertise for policy research and practice, innovation by identifying and learning from scalable innovations for policy and project design, and exchange by promoting a regional network for peer exchange and learning amongst national experts. The KICS EAP Hub creates opportunities for knowledge producers and users to meet, learn, and exchange experiences on what works and what doesn't work in improving their national education systems. The hub is led by NORAG, with the support of the Global Partnership for Education and the International Development Research Center. It covers 21 countries located in Europe, Asia, the Pacific, Middle East, and North Africa. The hub's activities are demand-driven and designed to give voice and visibility to key country actors and institutions while supporting them to improve the inclusion, equity, and quality of education systems and accelerate progress towards SDG 4. Which activities is the hub offering to country participants? Webinars, learning cycles and workshops, regional conferences, podcasts, blog posts and video interviews, digital learning platform, and inter-country visits. Activities are conducted in English, Russian, and Arabic. Interested in engaging in the KICS EAP Hub? Visit us online.
Спасибо большое, Пол.
Thank you, Paul. Now I would like to give a brief overview what we expect today. Paul will show the agenda for today. Today we have a day dedicated to the challenges and possibilities in pandemic time, and also we would look ahead and think about digitalization in education. Today we have such a program. First, we will have keynote from Executive Director of NORAC. Then we have a speaker from GP, and then we will have the main two blocks. So the first is 11:30 to 1 p.m. European time. First is the challenges and possibilities under the pandemic COVID-19, and the second is perspectives of the digitalization in digitalization time. Then there would be a break, and 1:30 p.m. up to 3 p.m. or European time, we are going to discuss development of education in digital time and digital education and digital teaching and learning. And here very happy to note that we are going to listen to experience on who were involved in the response to pandemic during the pandemic. Also, we have partners from NGO who also made the efforts to provide access to education for all children. And I would like to have you good time and would like to give the floor my colleague Moira for.
Thank you very much, Julia, for that introduction. And I need to say first and foremost that we at NORAG are proud to host the KICS Europe Asia Pacific Hub. And this KICS Knowledge Innovation Exchange Initiative is a multi-year program which is funded by the GPE through the IDRC that facilitates knowledge sharing through 4 hubs. And the point of this knowledge sharing is really to support national education systems in bridging the gap between research, policy, and practice. And our KICS Hub team is very ably led by José Luis Canellas, and they are dedicated to pursuing the KICS goals in the 21 GPE partner countries that are situated in Europe, Asia, and Pacific region. And as you saw in the video, very specifically making sure that they are demand driven by the countries in their region and supporting national experts to share their expertise. And this is a real convergence and complementarity of goals between NORAG and the KICS EAP Hub, that the critical notion of surfacing underrepresented expertise, particularly from national level and from countries that don't necessarily always, are not necessarily always heard outside of national settings, facilitating capacity building at this critical interface between research, policy, and practice, and also to mobilize, co-produce, and disseminate relevant knowledge. And that is contextually relevant knowledge and knowledge that is useful for the building of these equitable, accessible, and quality education systems around the world. So our KICS core partners, the Global Partnership for Education, who you'll be hearing from later today, and the International Development Research Center. And then on top of that, we have more than 30 partners for this EPIC conference, EPIC Education Policy and Innovation Conference, and it will be EPIC too. Specific points just for the next month that we will be together 1 day a week for the next month. The conference is bringing together researchers, policymakers, practitioners from the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, Central Asia. And if you look down the participants' introductions, you'll see all of the other countries and regions that are represented. I saw several from Africa as well. And we have 4 days in this conference, each of which have a thematic focus. Today, we're looking at the COVID-19 response and digital learning specifically. Next week, next Thursday at the same time, gender equality and social inclusion. And then day 3 is on educational assessment. And day 4, teaching, quality, and learning. All of those sessions are open access, and they will all be simultaneously available in English and Russian. And at the end of each day, the sessions will be, not at the end immediately of each day, the sessions will eventually be made available on video as well, in both English and Russian. And our first learning cycle participants will share their studies, and some KICS and global regional research grantees will also be presenting at this conference. And we were so pleased by the positive response to our call for abstracts for this conference. We received more than 120 applications from people to present today and over the next 4 days that we're together this month. Finally, a quick reference to our highlights today. Soon you'll be hearing a keynote address by Margarita Focalicht, who's the manager of the partnerships team at the Global Partnership for Education, and also Val Mendez, senior project officer at UNESCO. There are then 2 groups of 4 thematic sessions, and all information about the agenda, the sessions, and timing will be shared in the chat as you need to move from one place to another. So I am thrilled to open this conference, and I'm thrilled with the program that your KICS EAP Hub team has put together for you. And I will hand over now to José Luis.
Thank you so much, Moira, and welcome everyone to our Education Policy and Innovation Conference. I will move now to the introduction of our keynote speakers today, but first, a small mention of apologies from our KICS EAP Hub Director, Professor Gita Steiner-Ramsey. Unfortunately, she could not join us today, but she will be joining us in the other days, and she's supporting us and leading us from the backgrounds. So I am pleased to introduce you today two keynote speakers. Our first keynote speaker is Margarita Focas-Licht. She's manager partnerships team of GPE. We know that GPE is our funder, is our main partner in implementing the KICS EAP initiative alongside IDRC. Margarita, after managing GPE country support team for several years, she currently leads GPE's efforts to strengthen partnership effectiveness and engagement. Margarita has nearly 30 years of experience working on education in developing countries. Prior to joining the GPE Secretariat in 2011, she was UNICEF's education chief in Madagascar. She has also worked as Save the Children's Norway's education advisor in Ethiopia, special needs education expert at UNESCO, and as a teacher in Madagascar. Her work over the years has focused on education for marginalized children through both formal and alternative pathways, ranging from school and community level engagement to district, national, and global program development, policy dialogue, and partnerships. So Margarita will be sharing some of the learnings of GPE's current support to countries in facing the COVID-19 pandemic. She's joined also by Valtencir Mendes, who is going to bring also the perspective from UNESCO on the joint work that UNESCO, UNICEF, and the World Bank have been doing with GPE in supporting countries. Valtencir Mendes is a European PhD in project and systems engineers from UPC Barcelona Tech in collaboration with the University of Glasgow, UK. He pioneered research on emerging technologies and multi-stakeholder partnerships for the achievement of the UNESCO Education for All initiatives. Valtencir is a UNESCO Senior Education Program lead and coordinates the implementation of the Global Partnership for Education's response to COVID-19 consortium of grant agents, UNESCO, UNICEF, and the World Bank, as well as activities under the framework of the UNESCO Division for Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems. So we are very pleased to welcome Margarita and Val to our conference today, and I give it over to you, and I invite everyone here in the audience to please include your comments, your questions in the chat, and we will be having a short Q&A session where we'll be reading some of your questions, and we'll be giving you the opportunity for you to pose your questions orally too. So I give the floor to Margarita, please.
Thank you so much, José Luis, for the introduction, and thanks to the KICS Europe, Asia, and Pacific Hub for inviting me to join you and provide this opening address at this event. I'm really delighted to be able to share some insights and reflections on this first conference theme of COVID-19 and digital learning. I believe I have some slides that should be posted on the screen, and we can move directly to the second slide, please. So thank you. So the COVID-19 pandemic has, as we all know, caused unprecedented disruption to education systems globally, affecting the lives of more than 1.5 billion students and their families. And at the peak of school closures, it's estimated that over 90% of the world's learners were affected. Globally, countries reported close to an average of 50 days of in-person teaching and learning lost to school closures. But we know that a massive number of children have lost much more than that. And COVID-19 has dramatically changed the landscape of education. The combined impact of school closures and economic hardship means that millions of the most vulnerable children, especially girls, may never set foot in a classroom again unless we act collectively and efficiently as a global community. And in this session, I'd like to discuss 4 ways in which the Global Partnership for Education has responded to the crisis by mobilizing and supporting stakeholders across the partnership to respond, but also opening opportunities for creative approaches to reach the most marginalized, which I believe you'll be talking about in this conference. I will first provide an overview of COVID-19 response grants provided to GPE member countries. I'll then invite our colleague Val Mendez from UNESCO to talk about a novel collaboration GPE is supporting between the World Bank, UNICEF, and UNESCO on COVID responses at national, regional, and global level. Next, I will talk a little about the KICS COVID-19 Observatory for Africa, which is led by the Association of Development of Education in Africa, IDEA, and the Gender Unit of the African Union, CIEFA. Finally, I'll share a brief overview on how GPE is pivoting to respond to this new reality, supporting governments and partners to transform national education system. And next slide, please. So let me get started on the first theme of country grants. Within 2 weeks of the pandemic being declared in March 2020, the GPE provided a grant of 8.8 million to UNICEF first, to support ministries of education in 87 countries to prepare COVID-19 responses and coordination. And within a further 2 weeks, the GPE board unlocked an initial 250 million to support partner countries in their efforts to mitigate both the immediate and long-term impacts of COVID-19 on education. It then released an additional 250 million in June 2020 in response to the large number of countries seeking support. By October last year, GPE had provided 467 million in dollars in COVID-19 grants aimed at helping governments support learning and equity for up to 355 million children in 66 countries. The grant applications had to be based on government COVID-19 education response plan. This thus promoting coordinated responses that were country-driven and helped align partners behind government priorities for a coherent approach to the response. The grants also had to include a monitoring and learning component to support countries to document and share information and experiences. And depending on the size of the countries, the grants ranged from $750,000 to $20 million per country. In addition, GPE, as we've mentioned, provided $25 million to a global grant to UNICEF, UNESCO, and the World Bank that we'll hear more about from Val. And across all countries, 3/4 of the GPE grant funds supported equity and learning initiatives, with the remainder supporting reopening efforts and systems resilience. More than half of the country grants specifically support girls. All the grant applications, not surprisingly, had a spotlight on ICT, defined in a broad sense and referring to all communication technologies, including internet, telephone, and social media. And more specifically, 41% of the funds for learning continuity activities went to low-tech radio and TV solutions. 24% went to high-tech online solutions, such as mobile phone, tablets, or web platforms. And given the difficult context that GPE works in, 35% went to what we call no-tech solutions, such as printed materials that were distributed to remote areas. So let me move to the next slide and share a few examples of strategies that were taken by countries to support digital learning specifically. I'll start with Ghana, and this information is based on a recent evaluation of the COVID grants, an initial evaluation to see how the grants have been used. In Ghana, a COVID, if it can. Yeah, in a COVID-19, I think we are on the right slide. Sorry, I don't, you can flip back to the other one. In Ghana, a COVID-19 response technical team was established, bringing together the Ministry of Education, development partners, and private sector actors, among others. And one result has been an e-learning platform that was launched earlier this year, and it's called Edmodo. Led by the ministry in collaboration with Ghana Education Service and the Ghana Library Authority, Edmodo is a digital learning initiative designed to connect Ghanaian learners to their teachers to ensure continuity of learning. The GPE COVID-19 grant has also been used by the ministry to work with partners to develop over 1,600 TV and radio lessons for primary students, over 1,000 lessons for Ghana Learning TV, and an online enhanced video library. And progress is also being made in the development of teacher training modules for digital literacy, which will be available on the Edmodo platform. All of the educational content uploaded on the Ghana Library Authority Enhanced Digital Library is also linked to the learning management system. So this is quite an advanced and connected system of ways of delivering educational content to learners. And a final note in relation to Ghana is that the government has made significant efforts to engage key stakeholders, including private sector actors, to work with ministry institutions to address different elements of digital learning. And this includes Vodafone to address connectivity challenges, Zoom to address teacher access issues, and NTN to develop digital content. Now I'm going to say a few words about what's happened in the Organization for Eastern Caribbean States, which covers a number of Caribbean islands that partner with GPE. And OECS has used GPE funds to provide mobile devices to students in particular. A separate public-private collaboration with the telecoms company Digicel has met the connectivity needs by enabling devices to be connected, and a further partnership with Microsoft Teams has provided the learning platforms free of charge to students. In this context, the provision of a relatively small number of devices to students has had the potential to effectively bridge the equity and digital gap, because the islands have small populations and low numbers of primary schools. And connectivity is therefore easier to address because few areas are extremely remote compared to many other countries. And I should highlight here that the devices are particularly given to students who didn't have access to these devices otherwise. Many students, of course, already have access, but this was really focused on those who didn't. OECS officials have observed that the bulk pooled procurement through GPE funding allowed for a more cost-effective purchase of tablets than would have been obtained had the islands tried to procure these devices on their own. And one stakeholder noted that COVID-19 has pushed us into thinking outside the box and in the digital space. Therefore, we need to maintain and monitor this on an ongoing basis. So you can see there that it's leading to people to think about how to integrate digital solutions more permanently in education. And a short final example I want to share is from Pakistan, where education provision in the Balochistan and Sindh provinces had already been hampered by natural disasters, poor infrastructure and remoteness, and by political, economic, and security problems. And since 2014, GPE support has led to 53,000 previously out-of-school children enrolled in schools in Balochistan, and the tracking of educational data in all 29 districts in Sindh. From WhatsApp groups to biometric fingerprint systems, innovative technology has helped with building and restoring schools and improving teacher retention in these remote regions during COVID. So Pakistan is now building on its experience of delivering distance learning during COVID-19 to design and implement an inclusive distance learning pathway for up to 19 million children who were already out of school pre-pandemic. So again, this is an excellent example of, using the pressure that's been put actually on providing digital learning to think further on how that can help solve the massive out of school issues that we have across so many countries. So next slide, please. I'll now shift to the global and regional grant. In addition to the grants that I just described to countries, As I said, 25 million was provided to the consortium of UNICEF, UNESCO, and the World Bank to develop solutions for teaching and learning continuity with the potential to be scaled up globally and to generate fresh evidence to inform policy. And this was also an opportunity to strengthen collaboration across these three organizations and maximize synergy across their programs. And as we've watched them work together, we've been really impressed with what our partners have been doing with this grant funding and how much it's led to collaboration. The grant focuses on three priority areas. First, regional and global learning platforms to support distance and blended learning. And this leverages the Global Education Coalition, another important partner of GPE, to match country needs and partner solutions, facilitate knowledge sharing, and develop national capacity. And second, learning continuity at scale to roll out multifaceted remote learning using print, radio, television, and mobile technologies. And third, monitoring and evidence to draw lessons from the COVID-19 responses in different contexts to build more resilient education systems through joint surveys, rapid impact assessments, and reporting on the gender impact of COVID-19. So now I'm going to give you a break from my voice and happily now invite Val Mendez from UNESCO headquarters in Paris to tell us more about this work. And over to you, Val.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Margarita. This was a great introduction to the work we are doing as well. So, but first, just say thank you as well to GPE, to KICS EAP for this invitation. It's an honor to be here on behalf of UNESCO and the consortium as well. So, if we can move to the next slide, please. So as Margarita just mentioned, we have three main components in this grant. And I would say they are balancing between our analytical work, the joint development of global tools, and this is very important for us, the global public goods. So we want that this grant can generate public goods, and we are working towards this direction. But also having given us the opportunity to test new tools and generate more capacity building, and using coordination in terms of dialogue among governments, among partners, and generating, I would say, some practical implementation that needs to be very fast because of the pandemic, and also trying to scale these innovations on the ground. So the three components we have, the first one is led by UNESCO, that is this regional initiatives and platforms. So we have basically three main platforms, one for Francophone Africa, another one for Anglophone Africa, and another one for the Pacific. And I will give a brief example later on. And then an element that is very important, and we saw during COVID, was the special needs. We saw that we very quickly shifted towards remote learning. However, we didn't have...
Извиняюсь, коллеги, я извиняюсь, пожалуйста, один только переводит, потому что мы сейчас слышим обоих переводчиков на русском канале.
The interpreter in Russian. Can I continue? I'll move ahead. So, yeah, and what we saw is that was very important to have some materials, some contents designed for children with special needs. And this is also part of the first component. And then the second one that is led by the World Bank and UNICEF, we go into the scaling up of the program. And we have some elements that are working very strongly on guidance, generating tools for teachers, for example. Another one that is Read at Home, that we are basically shipping and doing procurement of books, of real books, and delivering to children, because we know that this is a very, very strong need, and in times of COVID, even more. And then also, we are generating other public goods in terms of foundational learning that I will show you in a moment. Another one is the Learning Passport for girls, giving a focus on girls. As Margarita mentioned, gender was really an important issue of the grants that GP has been offering as well as one of the targets. And then the third component that we have is the dedicated exclusively to the evidence, to generate research surveys that can give us some light, shed some light in terms of how COVID has impacted the education systems and how we can move ahead. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So we can see here, going into a little bit of details regarding the platforms, we have this. The first one is the Imagine Call, that what we did was to create very, very powerful and high quality content. And we developed a platform that is called Imagine Call. And together with this platform that is running in 10 countries, we developed a learning ecosystem program that actually what is trying to do is reinforce the local capacities, generating training in the 10 countries, and in a way that the same producers of content in each one of these countries will be able to upload their OER, their open education resource, for instance. But while this doesn't happen, we already have this very quality content that is making the possibility to use it in the classroom right now a reality. The second platform is the Imagine Learning Africa. This we used another model, is based in EDX, and here we are also introducing the teachers dimension. We are bringing our institute, ICPA, in teacher training to support us and to bring their models that they are developing especially for this. The third platform is dedicated to Asia Pacific, and we have here one that's called Wakamoana, and we are trying through this platform that has been, I think, designed in a way to engage with the region. So we have very active local partners like USP and other partners from Fuji, from different countries and islands. And we are trying to really tailor a platform that is connected to the universities, to the local ecosystem, to the governments, and in a way that the governments and the system own these platforms. And in terms of the sustainability ahead, this will be a reality because it's already embedded in their local systems. So this is an example of platform. If we can move to the next slide, please. As I mentioned before, special needs is really, really key in times of, in usual times, but in times of COVID and pandemics is critical. And this program that is led by UNESCO Bangkok is developing translating books and resources for kids with special needs. And we have right now all these numbers that are on the screen here already, books that are translated and endorsed. Also very important, endorsed by the ministries of education in the region. And what is also a step ahead, and I think a very good added value of this program, is the connection with the Global Education Coalition that Margarita mentioned in the beginning. And that connection gave us the possibility to collaborate with the Global Digital Library. That is this global initiative that brings resource and through technology, books and reading materials, and in this way, in an accessible way. So we can say that our program is feeding the Global Digital Library with accessible materials right now. So the next slide, please. I'm trying to be aware of the time, so I'll try to speed up. So this is another part of the component of the UNESCO Bangkok in special needs. This is designed for teachers, so very important, the teacher training, the capacity building dimension as well. The next slide, please. And here we have one of the components that is led by the World Bank, that is technology for teaching. And it's a toolkit, basically, that is aiming to support policymakers and researchers in the planning, let's say, in the medium to long-term design of hybrid learning solutions. So we are trying to get together here through the World Bank and UNICEF resource, and developing specific resources that are targeting to, let's say, low technologies, middle or high technology. So we can have package, for example, that is dedicated to radio, to printed materials, to TV, to digital tools, all together in a place, and also other elements in terms of, for example, adaptive learning, EMS, and all about platforms. So it's basically giving the opportunity for policymakers to understand these concepts of digital learning or hybrid learning and have all together in a place in a didactic, we would say, in a step-by-step way. So this is one of the resource that we are building, and also with this intention of generating public goods as well. Next slide, please. So here we have another part of the toolkit that is dedicated to policymakers. And we can see here that what we want is that generate tools, and in the end will be a website with all these collected, and also not just by the agencies here, but by other resources that have been developed by other content providers as well. And because we believe there are so many resources out there, but sometimes we need to have it curated in a specific and tailored way for policymakers. So this is a bit the intention here. So the next slide, please. And then one of the components that is led by our colleagues in UNICEF is dedicated to that, to the foundational literacy and numeracy. As you know, this is a key component. It was already before COVID. Remember, we have those incredible numbers that basically we have over half of children in low and middle income countries that couldn't read, no? And they couldn't read a basic sentence with understanding, no? Kids by age 10. So this component here, what tries to do, the foundational literacy and numeracy, is that is developed by UNICEF, is actually create a hub and will be a website with resource and with curated materials that have some evidence, strong evidence base behind it, with how to do guidelines, etc. And you can see the partnership with J-PAL at the MIT. So we'll bring all this evidence-based dimension that we believe is very important when we go in terms of FLN. So the next slide, please. So the component 3 that is also led by UNESCO is the one that we have all the evidence based as well, the collected through the surveys that the program is running. So we already ran 3 rounds of the global survey that was basically trying to identify how COVID impacted in the schools and education systems. We have the picture you see in the screen is the last report we published. And this one, the last round, was in collaboration, apart from the members of the consortium, also with the OECD. And we can see, and together with these surveys, we also have some studies, for example, in financing of education, that is key. We saw the importance of programs like GPE in investing in education this moment. We also have another study coming out of this in the next week on gender, the impact on gender as well. But focus on this concrete survey. And if you see in the screen here, we have, I think, interesting numbers, and that can feed and can give us some insights for the conference ahead of us. So the first one would say that only 27%, of low and lower middle income countries had a fully operationalized policy on digital learning. What it means? It means that countries were not ready. The digital readiness or the maturity level of the countries regarding ICT education, regarding remote learning, were very low. So this shows us that we have a lot of work to do here in this regard, because the countries that had a better maturity level, they were able to respond in a better way. So another indicator here of findings of this research is we can say that most countries, 75%, didn't invest extra funds on remote learning, while we're requesting it's as usage. I mean, governments were saying we need to move to remote learning. However, there were no investments in reinforce the remote learning. And the last indicator, the last finding is regarding teachers. And that basically most of the countries didn't recruit or didn't add extra, additional teachers to this moment in which we really need it, because we need more support, in terms of remote learning. So these are I would say that one of the main challenge findings. So if we can move to the next slide, and I'm finishing. So one of the other components of the UIS study was this report that was launched and is focused on Asia. So I thought it was interesting to bring here. And one of the findings is that most of the countries were using online learning. We can see here, but obviously we have still deficits in terms of the quality, of the online learning. So if you can move to the next slide, please. And among the findings, we can see that we saw some challenges facing this moment in how we can ensure the continuity of learning. So challenges such as the lack of disaggregated data. Many countries didn't have it. Inadequate technology, infrastructure. So challenges regarding the digital gap, when they were very present in this study. But we also offered, and our colleagues in UNESCO Bangkok will present this report soon, together with the UNICEF. And we also offered some roadmap, how we can try to do this remediation, in a fashion way, starting with the formative assessment, for example, and finishing with supporting the school-based, peer support groups for teachers. So teachers, you see now this research that are key, as we already knew before, but during the pandemic, they came as really a need to reinforce support the teaching profession as well. So the next slide, please. So that is, I would say that we are very grateful to the GP for this partnership and for this support. Thanks to the grant, we would say that our agencies, UNICEF, UNESCO, and the World Bank, we are even closer than before. And we are, I think, align also some of the programs on the ground. And as I mentioned before, generating this public goods, that is key, because we have sometimes very interesting programs that are not available as a public good. So in terms of surveys, etc. And also regarding the surveys, something I want to stress is by the fact that we are working together, we are avoiding this survey fatigue in the government, because we have in the past so many agencies coming to run different surveys. So with this one, we run 3 rounds of the survey, for example, and with the last one with 4 agencies. And this is thanks to this grant that put us together and make us able to do in this way. So I think in terms of how we approach government in our way ahead, this is a very good example. And that is, thank you very much. Over to you, Jose Luis or Margarita.
Margarita, I don't know if you'd like to add something. Thank you so much, Val.
Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, I did have a few more slides. I'll actually try to shorten a little bit, because I think we're taking a lot of time. But first of all, I want to thank Val from UNESCO. And what I really like about this, what Val just presented, is it really shows the complementary mandates of UNESCO, UNICEF, and World Bank, and how well they can, when these 3 big agencies work together, that the way that these mandates are complementary and what they can achieve together. So we really appreciate what the work that's being done. But let me now shift quickly to GPE's 3rd area of investment in COVID and digital learning, which is through the KICS COVID-19 Observatory for Africa. Thank you for putting up the right slide. Launched in November last year, this observatory collects, synthesizes, and mobilizes evidence about COVID-19 responses in primary and secondary education in 41 GPE partner countries in Africa, and is focused on education system responses to COVID and the well-being of learners. It also tracks emerging research, including interventions being tested and evaluated on these topics. And as you can see on the screen, the observatory is implemented by ADEA and by the African Union CFA with technical support from the African Population and Health Research Center. So I just want to share some of the emerging insights from the observatory that relate to COVID and digital learning. Next slide, please. In addition to live trackers that follow the policy responses of these 41 African countries in the area of assessment, school reopening, education financing, teacher training, support learning, and learner well-being, the observatory has published several reports, including the two shared here on teacher and learner well-being and education financing in Africa during the pandemic. And I want to talk a little bit about the teacher situation in Africa, which has presented particular challenges for responding to COVID for several reasons. And one is that the sub-Saharan Africa region records the lowest proportions of qualified teachers in the world. And additionally, a lack of structured teacher training on the use of ICT creates a major challenge. Teacher shortages are also acute in sub-Saharan Africa, where 70 to 90% of countries face 70% of countries face shortages at the primary, and 90% of countries face shortages at the secondary level in teachers. And while all AU, African Union member states, provided distance learning materials following school closures, including radio, television, and digital learning, millions of learners across Africa didn't have access to or the skills to use ICT equipment needed to deliver or access remote learning. So the KICS Observatory Education Financing reports describe some notable responses to these challenges. We've already heard about Ghana, but other examples include South Sudan, Kenya, and Zambia, where governments have supported lesson delivery through radio and television and the use of tablets. And in Cabo Verde, funds have been used to strengthen capacities for the use of radio and technology capacity development for teachers using digital platforms, the provision of learning materials for those who can't access online learning, and solar TVs to students in remote areas. And also, I want to talk also in terms of how ministries have leveraged collaborations with private sector tech actors. For example, in Uganda, through a collaboration between the Belgian Development Agency, Enable, and the National Teachers Colleges, teachers were introduced to ICT tools, educational practices, and skill sets through the Teacher Training Education Sandbox project. And similar trainings have been funded in other countries. So I want to talk a little bit about financing, however, because we've talked about how GPE supported response plans to COVID, but available funds will actually only cover about 1/4 of the resources that are needed. So one of the main recommendations from the observatory is that far greater domestic resources are required to finance the emergency response. And such resources could come from reprogramming within available frameworks and from partnerships with local entrepreneurs, including distance learning and service providers. I'm going to skip a little bit some of my points because I'm very aware that we're taking so much time. So let me move straight to some of the lessons learned. One of the biggest lessons is that it's critical to support multiple delivery channels for remote learning. The heterogeneity in country context necessitates a combination of digital and non-digital approaches, such as TV, radio, and take-home packages in the delivery of remote learning. And those approaches must include material for learners with special needs. Online content should use open source tools and be free, as we heard some good examples of in the previous presentations. Connectivity and free access should also be extended to remote areas. Another key lesson is that technology-based programs carry the risk of increasing equity gaps. So special attention needs to be paid to ensuring that the most marginalized and vulnerable children are not left behind. And a fourth key lesson is that supporting teachers is essential, especially in context of remote learning. Teachers need training and support on remote pedagogy, assessment, and learner engagement. And over 50 of GPE's COVID-19 grants include some form of support to teachers during both the response and recovery phases of the pandemic. To ensure equitable access to remote learning for marginalized communities of students and teachers, it's important for countries to support and finance the development of digital infrastructures, including coherent policies and supporting resources. And finally, technology-based programs also need to be accompanied by robust monitoring and evaluation strategies so we can track what strategies are working best, which interventions are having the most success, and what types of tools, support, pedagogies, and approaches are making the biggest difference. And I'm just going to end by saying a few words about GPE's new strategy. Next slide, please, which was developed through a broad collaborative effort of GPE stakeholders right in the midst of the pandemic. And it was driven by the ambition of ministries of education of GPE partner countries who emphasized in no uncertain terms that we need to move beyond business as usual and raise our ambitions to help countries achieve SDG 4. So to achieve our vision of a quality education for every child, GPE's mission is to mobilize partnerships and investments that transform education systems in developing countries, leaving no one behind. And you can see here the goal that we have set ourselves collectively as a partnership